For as old as I am basically just young enough that I missed out on most of the 16-bit RPG classics that most people think of when assessing the genre. I never got to experience titles like Chrono Trigger or the early Final Fantasy games. I did have a Sega Genesis that I played quite a bit as a child, but the best it ever got for me in terms of RPGs was Warriors of the Eternal Sun, a D&D game which I'm sure I'll talk about at some point. Probably when I'm held hostage and forced to against my will, but I'll get there. Because of that, I never really got the opportunity to really understand what made those games special. A lot of what I know about most of the games from that era is through osmosis, hearing things through the grapevine and the internet. In recent days, I've made a concerted effort to populate my Twitter feed with a lot of content from indie developers and pixel artists, and the reasoning for that is twofold. One, it's just fun to have a lot of nice looking artwork and video games in my feed on that hellscape of a website. And two, there is often a clear influence from 16-bit games of yore in a lot of indie titles. And one game I stumbled across where that appeared to be particularly true was Alterium Shift, developed by a duo of dudes working under the moniker of Dratseek Games and currently scheduled for release in late 2023. No, this game is not out yet, but it does have a playable demo available on Steam. One thing that I should say about myself is that I typically avoid game demos like the plague. This is largely because my pea-sized brain is incapable of understanding that a demo is not actually representative of the final product. So, as a way of stopping myself from forming unjust opinions from those demos, I've started to just abstain from them entirely. But I'm glad I broke that rule in the case of Alterium Shift, because just playing through the demo, I really think I was able to learn more about what made those classic titles so special. I mean, the developers themselves refer to the game as an SNES JRPG-inspired indie game, so that it comes off feeling like something of an homage to those games should not be surprising. Most everything about the gameplay is incredibly traditional. You get to explore from area to area, conversing with NPCs in town, and finding hidden items out in the wild. Step wrong and a bunch of lost creatures from the farm ambush you to get put out to pasture. Combat consists of your typical attack, spell, and guard trio of choices, with individual characters skilled in using particular elements from the classical tree of earth, water, fire, and wind. There's also a burst attack mechanic, which unlocks especially powerful skills when a bar is filled through both taking and dealing damage. The game's appearance is pseudo-3D. The presentation of the pixel art, mainly seen in the character sprites and animations, is done with clear two-dimensional stylings, while most aspects of the environment, certain enemy models, and spell effects are 3D. The two blend together really nicely and never become disorienting or out of place in comparison to one another. The soundtrack is fully modern in terms of tone, no chiptunes or anything like that here, but it manages to help drum up atmosphere with zero issue whatsoever, whether it be in the cozy tracks found in town or the surprisingly catchy upbeat battle theme. The demo starts with the player picking one of three characters, being either Pyra, a spear-wielding fighter type whose use of fire magic matches her personality, Sage, an exceptionally skilled mage who's capable of using every element, and Atlas, a young man who's quick with a bow, and a suitable doormat for the much pushier personalities of the other two. The strengths and weaknesses of these characters are about what you would expect. Pyra is the tank, Sage, because of their skill in every element, is basically never outmatched by an opponent, and Atlas has a unique guard ability which boosts his evasion for multiple rounds. Regardless of who you choose, you soon find yourself in the town of Summerton as a student at the local academy under the tutelage of General Dolian. You're coming up on the end of your training and must embark on a final task from the General in order to prove what you've learned. Things go about as wrong as possible, and you suddenly find yourself alone in an unknown world. Now, I know what you're probably thinking at this point, but Fandrax, I've seen this all before in other games. Yeah? And? No, I'm serious. What is wrong with the fact that a lot of these themes might be familiar? Tropes and stereotypes become what they are and, in effect, enter the public consciousness because they're undeniably effective in terms of providing a memorable experience, whether it be from a story or gameplay standpoint. Innovation is great, and when done in the right way, separates good games from great, and great ones from all-timers. But the fact that Alterium Shift leans into what has made a host of previous titles so well liked doesn't diminish its value in any way. That's especially true when you consider that this formula, the combination between tactical combat, pixelated graphics, a musical score that's engaging but not overbearing and not even necessarily trying to take center stage, that's magical. It just works. And more than anything, what Alterium Shift showed me was that is why a lot of those older titles are so beloved. Even in the short time that you get to spend with the demo, you can really start to see how those different aspects working together create something special. There's a lot of personality in this demo, namely in how the characters interact with each other and the world around them. This is probably best seen in the fact that the story changes depending on who you actually play as. When the stories overlap with each other, you get to see familiar cutscenes in new ways, not to mention that each character is sent on a unique task by Dolian as the narrative kicks off. Humor is something that's pretty ingrained as well. Sage, for one, practically can't speak a single sentence without patronizing someone, usually Atlas, and the game will just outright start leaning on the fourth wall when it's appropriate. Also, there's an entire book of puns that you can read at one point, which is so stupidly amazing that I thought it warranted a mention. The game also gets more than its money's worth out of this surprised animation. And while it's hard to make any concrete determinations of the story, it very much seemed like it's heading down a sort of character-driven path, which shouldn't be a surprise considering the narrative is literally crafted around these specific characters. The demo finds time to allude to the innate skills of each protagonist, very much setting up something of a Destiny angle for the trio. There is a good amount of supplemental material that spells out the history of the world, including the presence of the Alterium essence that serves as the world's version of mana, which is what skills are cast from. Now, the demo isn't perfect, there are a few very minor spelling and grammatical errors in the dialogue, and I also found this weird bug where this text box will pop up in the middle of the road. Sage is studying here, apparently. As for what I think the game could improve upon, an actual map of the areas you're exploring would be nice. The overworld map is gorgeous, and maybe the best representation of the game's graphical style, but it isn't too difficult to get lost in some of the individual areas. Also, a quest log would be much appreciated. I forgot my current quest between sessions at one point and was left with no real way of figuring out what I was supposed to do outside of running all the way back to town to ask Dolian again. Perhaps most importantly, however, in all of this is that the demo more than left me wanting more. I played through it with every character, not only for the purposes of this video, but because I wanted to. Not only did I want more of Alterium Shift, I wanted to try some of the games that it was inspired by. Chrono Trigger is on Steam, and I already know that it's going to come after my wallet during the next sale. Alterium Shift is proof that certain things just go together, and no matter how many times they've been done, can still satisfy, like a cold drink on a hot day, or peanut butter and jelly. Even in spite of the demo's shorter length, and the fact that I haven't played the games that inspired it, that this small indie game developed by two dudes is as engrossing as it is a testament to the intentions it was created with. I've never understood the idea that new titles relying on what made those that came before them great is an issue. We're living in an age where games are remastered, rebooted, and ported to new systems constantly, which suggests that we, as a collective consumer base, want those memorable aspects in our games. Thus, a new game that strikes many of the same chords as those that make up the hallowed halls of gaming's pantheon, introducing those themes to a new audience in the process, is a good thing, and I, for one, can't wait to play Alterium Shift when it's released.